guest. I'm joined by the senior Congress MP who's also the chairperson of the Standing Committee on External Affairs, and he's been a senior UN diplomat. Shashi Tharoor joins us. Appreciate your joining us, Dr. Tharoor. You've come out strongly in support of the government action and Operation Sindoor. You've said we've made our point, acted in self-defense, and then gone on to say it's time for all concerned to act wisely to prevent uncontrolled escalation. How do you expect a de-escalation to take place? How do you see Operation Sindoor?
Well, look, first of all, I think Operation Sindoor was extremely well done. It was calibrated. It was very, very calculated as an action. If you look at the fact that they hit 9 terrorist launch pads, terrorist headquarters, well-known terrorist bases, no one has any doubt about any of these locations. Muridke, for example, even though it's in Pakistan proper, has been talked about for many, many years as the LET headquarters. No one has any doubt that what India hit were legitimate targets. But at the same time, India went out of its way to be careful with two things. First, it didn't strike any Pakistani government or military installations. That was in order not to give them a provocation to escalate. Second, it did so at night. It did so at night so that it would minimize collateral damage among civilians. I thought that was a very sensible thing to do. Muridke, for example, is a populated town. If people had been out in the streets when we attacked, there would have been civilian casualties. We hit at 105 to 130, and very, very few people risked collateral damage in the process. So I think India was conveying through its choice of targets and the way in which it did it, that look, we are taking action to react against terrorism, to show that the terrorists that there will be a price to pay for their actions. But at the same time, we were conveying we are not interested in this being the opening salvo of a protracted war. This is clearly a one-off action. Now, Pakistan, of course, for its own wounded pride, has been issuing blood-curdling threats in the voice of its prime minister, threatening further retaliation. We will have to see, because, you know, the fact is that they can say these things, what they actually do is what will determine. We've seen some very, very increased shelling across the LOC, and unfortunately we've lost 10 civilian lives on our side of the LOC because of Pakistani shelling. Will that be enough for them to feel their honor has been satisfied? I don't know. There will be a couple of other things happening, Rajiv, that you and I can't sit here and estimate. There will certainly be a lot of diplomatic pressure taking place, and I think the pressure will be principally on Islamabad, because we don't need to be told not to take further action. We're not planning to take further action. Even in retaliating to artillery fire, we've kept to artillery fire. We're trying to show that we are balanced and restrained. It is only Islamabad that has, if you like, the key of control up the escalatory ladder. And if they decide that they are going to do something more serious, for example, sending a missile across to a civilian area, a city in India, or sending a plane or planes across to bomb our country or whatever, that kind of escalation, then of course we will be forced to react in kind. And the message probably is going from a lot of capitals to Pakistan: don't go that far, don't do anything that prompts India to respond in kind, because then there will be no controlling where this goes. And remember that our capacity to sustain a conflict is far greater than theirs. They have a stagnant economy. There are media reports, of course, unconfirmed reports, that essentially their army would be out of fuel in 4 days' time. It's not exactly a country really prepared for a long war with India. I would hope that common sense will prevail.
You say you hope common sense will prevail, but as we've seen, sometimes when you go up an escalatory spiral, there can be miscalculations or things can spiral out of control. Your sense, the world capitals by and large are saying it's time to ratchet down the temperature, to get the two sides to find some kind of a modus vivendi, some kind of a dialogue. Do you believe that's really possible given what happened in Pahalgam and Pakistan's long history with terror and its refusal in a way to abandon the terror factory? Do you believe that what we've done with Operation Sindoor is enough in a sense to act as a deterrent?
No, look, I think we have made our point, and for now, that point has been pretty effectively made. The calls for dialogue are sort of really much boilerplate, Rajdeep. We're not going to be in dialogue with the Pakistanis for a long time to come. The calls for restraint, however, are well placed. And if countries like the US, the UK, France, Russia, and even China tell the Pakistanis, cool it, it's quite possible that we may actually be able to return to the kind of tense stalemate that prevailed for very many years now after Balakot in 2019. Remember, we were already in pretty bad shape between the two countries. There are no high commissioners or ambassadors in each other's countries. There is very little dialogue, minimal grant of visas, minimal trade relationship. I will probably go back to that sort of bristling hostility short of war. But if Pakistan feels that it has been too deeply wounded in its self-esteem and that they need to exact a similar price in terms of bombing within India proper in order to prove that they can, then I'm convinced India will retaliate again. We're not going to let the Pakistanis think that they can spill Indian blood with impunity.
Shashi Tharoor, you're also a prominent opposition leader. You're one of the key faces. You're one of the key faces of the Congress party. We've seen today at least complete solidarity from the opposition with the government. You had said, I recall earlier, that questions of accountability for security lapses in Pahalgam, these questions are left for a later day. This is a moment to hit hard with action. Do you believe the debate therefore must focus now only on how do we deter, restrain Pakistan, cut down its terror factories? The accountability question has to be left for a later date?
Look, I mean, it's very, very clear, Rajiv, that if there is a quarrel inside a home, that quarrel pauses when bandits break in and point guns at you. Then your focus is on getting those guns removed. There will be time for a more detailed reckoning. I believe it's in the government's own interest to find out what went wrong, how it was allowed to happen. And indeed, there will be other aspects the government will want to analyze. But right now, our job as a nation is to stand united in the face of this incredibly tragic attack on our own people, the civilians, and the continuing tensions accompanied now by the Prime Minister of Pakistan's threats to us. This is not a time. I know that there are already people talking about these Pakistani claims to have shot down Indian jets and so on. I think all of these details, I would rather wait to hear from the government officially at every stage what's going on. So far, I believe the government has handled matters very impressively. I'm speaking personally, by the way. I'm not a spokesman of the party. And even my statement about deferring demands for accountability till after the crisis were made in a personal capacity. I must stress that because I don't want the Congress party to have to carry the can for anything I say. But what I'm saying to you, Rajdeep, as a member of parliament, is that I believe I speak for a large majority of the people I represent. Not just in my constituency, but people who are in touch with me from throughout the country, in saying that this is the kind of response that the Indian public wanted after Pahalgam. We knew that the government was taking various diplomatic steps, suspending India's Waters Treaty, all of that stuff. But that was never going to be enough. There had to be something more kinetic, something to show the terrorists that they just can't get away with this. You know, I mean, it just had got to a point where the script that the Pakistani terrorists and the Pakistani deep state had followed has been so tiresomely predictable and so painful since 2000. At least 15 or 16 major attacks where more than 20 Indian civilians have been killed. Incidents in which time after time after time, they do these things, then they issue a denial until, of course, proof is established that it really was them. And at that point, they go silent. Don't ever forget, and I'm surprised we didn't even remind the world of this in the statement this morning, that they are a country that claimed not to know where Osama bin Laden was until he was found hiding in a Pakistani military encampment in Abbottabad. That's the kind of country Pakistan is. We have to signal to the world we've had enough and we're not going to take any more. And I think this is what the public in India wants. And certainly it has been delivered with a great deal of maturity and restraint. As I said, it was a calibrated response. Let's see whether this is going to be seen by the rest of the world as fair. You must know that France, Russia, and Israel are three countries that have accompanied their calls for restraint and de-escalation with public expressions of sympathy for India's, an understanding for India's desire to respond to terrorist attacks. So it's not that we are completely alone in the world on this, Rajdeep.
You know, your comments are reassuring because, you know, national security does deserve a bipartisan consensus, which has sometimes been missing in recent times. Even when the Congress or the UPA was in power and Mumbai happened, the BJP was then in the opposition and targeted the Manmohan Singh government. In the past, we've had people from your party targeting this government after Balakot, asking for evidence, after Uri asking for evidence. It's much more reassuring this time to see a broad bipartisan consensus. Do you believe that will hold? Are you going to give the credit today to the armed forces, to the Modi government, when you say government has done an admirable job? I ask you this because politics has got so polarized that discovering a bipartisan consensus on issues is becoming more and more difficult, even on foreign policy and strategic affairs.
As I say, speaking in a purely personal capacity, I do congratulate all concerned, the government, the armed forces. I mean, even the manner in which the briefing was done this morning was very impressive, having two women officers there, one of whom was a Muslim woman officer, to convey that this is nothing about Hindu-Muslim. India is standing united. All of this was very, very well thought through. Somebody is using his brains or her brains in putting all these signals out. Even the name Operation Sindoor, such an evocative, emotive name, well chosen. I have absolutely no criticism to offer about any of this, Rajdeep. If it turns out that we have suffered the losses Pakistan claims, there will be time to find out why and what went wrong. But as far as I'm concerned right now, I'm standing with the government under the flag.
Shashi Tharoor, for speaking so clearly and lucidly as ever, I appreciate you joining me here on India Today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Raj.